I'm baiting up a 3-hook clip-down rig in front of Bradwell's nuclear power station. This is near the mouth and on the south side of River Blackwater in Essex. Many years ago I used to come here in the search of codling, but nowadays it's a catch-anything venue. By that I mean anything would be a bonus, but there are odd rays and bass here in the summer and whiting in the winter. Both sessions filmed for this video are in winter. The first is in December and the second at the beginning of February. In the first session I'm just using blow lug, which I dug the day before. I've arrived about 3 hours before high tide, be fishing over high water and about an hour and a half down. It's a fairly shallow venue, so I'm expecting to catch either side of high water if I catch at all. If I'm getting bites I may stay a bit longer, but generally during the ebb there is a bit of a weed problem, so I might have to cut the session short. Having got my first rod out, I'm taking a breather and deciding what I'm going to do with the other one. Well, that breather didn't last very long. I get a bite straight away and I'm into a fish. And I'm not surprised to find that it's a whiting, but at least it's a fairly decent sized one. As you can hear, it's fairly windy, but at least it's from the southeast, which means it's off my back. Winds over the last few days had been from the north, stirring up the water, giving it a little bit of colour, so things look quite promising. I've set up my second rod with a boom rig with the hope of catching something other than a whiting, but before I cast that out I'll run through the locational details. Bradwell is in the northern part of the Tendring Peninsula, which is the bit of land between the River Crouch and Blackwater. It's best known for its boat fishing sessions out from Bradwell Marina, but the estuary does have a number of venues which are well known for bass fishing, with Goldhanger and Tollsbury popular for lure fishing. I've not fished the north side yet, but have caught fish from Stansgate and St Lawrence. To get to the power station, you go past the turn-off Bradwell waterside and the old RAF memorial. There are 2 car parks behind the power station. Those wishing to fish use the smaller one on the right hand side. To get to the beach is quite a lengthy walk along the path by the perimeter fence. I've positioned myself to allow the power station to cut out a bit of that wind. I'm keeping my rods low since the waves and the tow aren't a problem and doesn't appear to be any weed present at the moment. It pulls more on the ebb, and if a weed becomes an issue then I'll raise them. I'm tightening up a slack line, try and put a bit of bend in the tips. Didn't take long to get my second indication. That was just a little tap which didn't hit. so I hold my rod and wait for the second one before I strike again. I thought I'd hit that one, but it looks like the fish hasn't been properly hooked and has come off. The smaller lugworm and the broken bits are in the blue bucket. My larger lugworm is wrapped up in newspaper, but I'm reserving that for another session. However, should I run out of smaller stuff, and if better fish arrive, then I may dip into that. Time for the pan round and look at the gear. There's a nice stretch of sandy beach with a ridge of broken shells at the top. The weed marks the strand line. If you watched any of my previous videos, you'll be familiar with my typical setup. A pair of Colmic 07 rods and Pen Affinity 7000 reels. Both reels are loaded with braid. As well as the clip down rig, I've also set up a short snood Sheppey rig. This is in case I'm missing lots of bites. For some reason or other, I seem to connect with more using this rig. Having missed a couple of bites on a clip down rig, I'm using the Sheppey rig and I've hit this one. Another whiting, about the same size as the previous one. My first bite on a boom rig. I was hoping for flatfish, but I never used to catch them at this venue, so maybe that's just wishful thinking. Another one to the Sheppey rig, this time on a top hook. first double shot comes to the boom rig. This looks like it's going to turn out to be another whiting fest, but at least at the moment they're of reasonable size. It's about 3/4 of an hour before the top of the tide, and the bites have increased, but so is the weed, and some of it's getting stuck in my top ring. My leader knot's getting stuck there, so I'm having to hand line my fish in, since I can't wind the leader in. Time to move on to the shell ridge. Picking up a bit more weed now, which makes things a bit more awkward. Things went a bit quiet over the top of the tide, but then picked up again as it started to ebb. Single and double shots of whiting continued to appear, and they were all of a similar size, with none of those tiny pin whiting. I carried on until the weeds started becoming more of a problem, pulling the rigs out of line. I ended up the session with 16 whiting, so it was more productive than I thought it was going to be. However, I was a bit disappointed that no other fish put in an appearance. But I suppose it was a bit too much to hope for a codling, particularly since those I had caught here before were normally at night, but they were never of any real size, so I'm quite pleased with these whiting. For my return visit in February, I decided to fish pretty much the same spot, but this time I'll be trying to avoid catching those whiting. I've set up the same rods and reels, but I've brought different bait. This includes sticky black lug, squid, sprats and bluey. I'll fish a sticky black lug on a boom rig tipped with squid or sprat, and my second rig is a loop rig which will have larger baits with fish and squid wrap on the bottom hook and probably bluey on the top. I'm casting boom rig out first, and I'm hoping to target tabs with this, although I've not been successful catching them here in the past. Baits and loop rig are aimed at bigger fish, but I'm not sure what big fish are around or what might take a fancy to them. Conditions are different this time, a slight onshore breeze. Not strong enough to make large waves, but there seems to be a bit more weed around. However, it is strong enough to make it chilly and create a bit of wind noise. Unlike my last session, I've had a pretty slow start, I've not had a bite, and I'm already needing to move up the beach. The jacket's on because it's bitterly cold. Having just moved, I get an unexpected bite on my loop rig. I strike into a couple of strong taps. And there appears to be something on. Well, would you believe it? It's a dab, and it's taken a whole sprat and a squid wrap. It's a nice sized fish, and it's my first from this stretch. Just goes to show that old lugworm is not necessarily the right bait for these. Sprats do work for me, but I've never caught one on a whole sprat and squid wrap. A close-up of a successful bait. It's pennelled with a size 1 and a 1/0 hook. It's hardly been chewed, so it doesn't need to be replaced, and neither does the bluey on the top hook. So all I need to do is just reclip the rig and cast out in the hope of catching something else. There's a link in the top right hand corner and in the description for this video of how I make these loop rigs if anyone's interested. Get my first little indication on the boom rig, but it doesn't develop into anything I can really strike into. Nevertheless, I wind it in and check to see if any of the bait's been taken. Top hook seems bare, so the baits need to be replaced. This time I'm going to try a bluey on the top hook and secure it with elastic. I'm snipping off excessive bits to make sure the hook point is clear. Fresh bits of sprats used to tip the sticky black lug on the other two hooks. I've moved to the strand line, and you can see by the amount of weed that's present there that that's likely to become an issue at some point. When the wind's onshore, there's more floating weed when it comes to the ebb. As high tide approaches, I start to get a few bites. Well, it's not a dab, but a reasonable whiting. I'm getting little taps, but very difficult to hit. All the bites to the boom rig now. I'm not getting any at all on the loop rig. It's now the top of the tide and the whiting are on the feed. Then, as predicted, the weed starts to become a problem. It's being picked up from the strand line and being dragged out as tide starts to recede. The wind has also picked up a bit. The buoy on the top hook of my loop rig hasn't been touched, but something's having a go at the sprat and squid wrap. I'll persevere with that, so that now needs to be replaced. I'm also putting the sprouted squid wrap on the top hook in place of that bluey. You can just about make out how I bait up. To help avoid that floating weed, I'm having to raise my rods up a bit. Later on, I needed to use my bait bag to weigh down the tripod as the tidal pull was pulling a bit too hard. I did catch another whiting, but as you can see, the weed did become a bit of a pain, and I decided not to fish too much longer. So, the pretty unproductive session, but at least I did get that dab, and it goes to show that you don't just have to fish worm baits to catch dabs.